Good evening. Welcome to the debate for the candidates running for the New York State Senate from the 1st Senatorial District. The League of Women Voters of the Hamptons, Shelter Island, and the North Fork is pleased to co-sponsor this debate with the leagues from Brookhaven, Huntington, and Smithtown. Let's meet the candidates. Sarah Anker is the Democrat, and Anthony Palumbo, the Republican incumbent. Welcome. Thank you very much for coming. I'm Susan Wilson of the League, and I'll be the moderator. The other member of the League that you'll see on screen is Eileen Mercer. She is our trusty timekeeper. So please pay attention when she puts up the little notes to remind you of where you stand time-wise. Others in the League involved with bringing you this debate are Arlene Hinkemeyer, Publicity Chairperson and Liaison with CTV, and the League Voter Services Committee, chaired by Neil Cohen. Our thanks also go to all of those who contributed questions for the debate, and a very special thank you to the staff at CTV, whose technical support has made it possible to view this debate on YouTube. Just a quick message about the League of Women Voters. The League is a political, nonpartisan, national grassroots organization. While we never endorse parties or candidates, we do take positions and advocate for issues affecting our community. Foremost among our goals is to educate voters, stimulate voter interest, and encourage voter participation. We are respected for sponsoring fair and impartial candidate debates, such as this one, and for the educational materials we distribute on voting issues. Now for the ground rules for this debate. Since we don't have a live audience, the questions were all submitted in advance by members of the community and the League of Women Voters and have been vetted to ensure that they are appropriate for this debate. The candidates will speak in alphabetical order. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for an opening statement. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to each question and 1 minute for a closing statement. In addition, each candidate will have the opportunity for 1 minute for one-minute rebuttal to each of their opponent's responses. Let's begin with opening statements, and we'll begin with Sarah Anker.
Hi. Okay, so I'm Sarah Anker, running for New York State Senate, District 1. I'm a former county legislator for the past 13 years. I have been working, again, prioritizing affordability, which I'm working on right now, of course, as your senator, hopefully to be. I worked on children's health. I've worked on environment, public safety. There's a lot of issues that I've worked on as a county legislator, and I'm bringing them to New York. So we have a loud voice. Prior to being a county legislator, I was the energy director for the town of Brookhaven, representing 500,000 residents. I created the actual Office of Energy and Sustainability and worked on Green Homes Go Solar programs. We had a $4.5 million grant, federally funded, to encourage people to go green, whether it's energy efficiency measures or using renewable energy. That would be solar, geothermal. So again, it was great experience. And again, I brought that to the county. In addition, prior to working with the town, actually probably over 20 years ago, I started Community Health and Environment Coalition, addressing the high cancer rate here in my hometown of Mount Sinai, and in particular breast cancer. I rallied with the community. I worked with the legislators and public officials, and we were able to bring the New York State Health Department back to do an investigation of why we have these high incidents of cancer. It was a very flawed study. If I get up to Albany, that will be one of my top priorities, making sure the Department of Health is doing their job. I have 3 children. I have a 32-year-old, a 28, and 23-year-old daughter. She just got her teaching degree in special education, elementary ed. I am pro-choice, pro-union, and proactive. And again, I'm looking to take my experience as a county legislator and working on cleaning up our environment, making sure we have a healthy environment, working on our roads, and again, making sure that quality of life is where it needs to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Anthony, opening statement, please.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you to the League for conducting this yet for another cycle. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Anthony Palumbo. I've been the senator in this district for the past 4 years, 3.5 years. Prior to that, I was a member of the Assembly. I grew up in Patchogue, Central Suffolk County. I graduated Patchogue Medford High School. After high school, I went to Lafayette College. Between college and law school, I was in the Suffolk County District, the Manhattan District Attorney's Office in New York County. And my father was a Suffolk County homicide detective, so I really was thinking of pursuing a career in law. And after a year in Manhattan, I went to St. John's Law School, graduated law school, became a Suffolk County Assistant District Attorney, and moved through the ranks there. I was in a major crime, in the Narcotics Bureau and a major crime bureau that does major cases like rapes and robberies and homicides. I was then promoted to be a trial supervisor for the 5 Eastern towns. And that's when I really fell in love with the East End. Although I'd spent a lot of time vacationing on the East End, shortly thereafter, I moved to the North Fork, where I live in Southold. I've been there for 24 years. I was the trial supervisor for the 5 Eastern towns in the DA's office. And after I got married, bought a house, new baby on the way, I went into private practice for about 10 years. And then after about 16 years as an attorney, in 2013, I ran for assembly. I was there for 7 years. Then when Senator Laval retired, he asked me to run, and I've been in the Senate ever since. Since I've been in the Senate, I've passed 57 bills in 3.5 years, many of which you folks know on the East End. For example, I carried the Community Housing Fund bill, which has now been implemented in 4 of the 5 East End towns. We've done a lot. Myself and Assemblyman Fred Thiel worked very closely together to do a number of different things. And I'm sure we'll get into them more deeply. And I'm getting the stop sign, so thank you.
Right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We received lots of questions covering a variety of topics, from crime and safety, reproductive rights, quality of life, to misinformation, working together, and the environment. Let's see how many of those topics we can cover in the time that we have now. Our first question goes to Sarah, and it is economy-based. The East End of Long Island is a spectacular vacation destination, occupied by many rich and famous people with lots of discretionary income. But for far too many of our East End residents, the cost of living here is a major concern, and for some, no longer possible. What legislation would you support to alleviate the economic pressure on middle and low-income families? Would you support tax credits for low-income parents, government aid to child care expenses, or help in purchasing a home?
I think all the above would be check. It's something we can definitely look into. So Long Island has a $7 billion tourist industry, and a lot of that money goes out towards the East End. But like what was said, a lot of the folks from the city have moved out to the East End, which has raised the value of the homes, but it also has raised the ability to afford living out on the East End. We need to do more to create more affordable and workforce housing. We can support our economy, but if there's no one to do the jobs, there goes the economy. So again, housing is, of course, one of the highest issues and highest priorities that we need to address in the state. As far as to making it more affordable, I've worked on several projects related to especially focusing on our young adults. And the concept is called a PIAC, Plan Young Adult Community. I worked on that project with Mitch Pally from Libby, Long Island Building Institute. And what we did, we looked at transorient development, which is creating housing near transportation hubs. Again, it's a form of smart growth, and where you build condensed housing in an area, and then you have the open space around it, so you have land preservation. We need to do more of that. Government needs to help those young people as they're paying off their college loans, and they have their car loans, and they have a low income because they're just starting. Our schools are actually the numbers are going down. The population is decreasing because young families just can't afford here. And again, we have a very large senior community that's out here. I chair the senior committee for the county, and I worked a lot with the senior communities to come up with reducing their cost. One was electric. I worked with PSEG to create a rebate program, and that's something we can do on a state level. Again, I focus mainly in my legislative district. I want to take the experience that I have, the programs that I have, and bring them to state level so we can have a more affordable lifestyle.
Thank you. Anthony.
Sure. And that, well, since I've been in the legislature, the issues change, but they change slightly, but they don't change so much. It's really, particularly regarding the East End and our quality of life, it's affordability is always one of the top 2 or 3 issues as Long Islanders. And, we have, unfortunately now in the legislature, it's more of a big government type of policy that the majority has. And, since we've had one party rule, our taxes have increased by $78 billion with a B. That's more than, I believe, 38 states' entire economies, entire budget. So we need to keep things small. My very first bill in the Assembly was a first-time homebuyer exemption. The community housing fund was something that was carried. Many members of my conference actually voted against it, and it was my bill. But Assemblyman Thiel and I got it over the finish line, got the governor to sign it, and it's implemented in 4 of the 5 eastern towns. Riverhead couldn't do it because they borrowed against their community preservation funds. The nuance of that bill is it adjusted some of those thresholds to make to implement the community housing fund revenue stream. But bottom line, we've done some things to help, I think, the affordability and the reasonableness of being on the East End and living on Long Island. And one of them is that community housing fund, which I think will go a really long way. And it should be a model to be used statewide on the rest of Long Island and beyond, simply because we now have a revenue stream for affordable workforce housing. We only have 2 minutes here, but there's a lot regarding the Southampton side as well, where the college is, of creating kind of a public-private partnership. When we had the public hearings for that housing fund, we had a teacher stand up. She said, I'm the one of two teachers in East Hampton High School under the age of 35 who live in the town of East Hampton. That needs to be reversed, not just for the East End, but for Long Island as a whole, for sure. And those types of policies, I think, are very helpful.
Okay, thank you. Yes, a rebuttal?
Rebuttal. So the taxes have increased, but they've increased across the board, federal, state, county, town. We need a strong voice in Albany because we are not getting our fair share. We're putting so much more money in the state and we're just not getting it back. And as a majority member of the Senate, I'll have a louder voice. I'll be able to get more funding, more attention for programs, including education, fixing our roads, and making sure that our area is affordable. People see, the rest of the state see Long Island as a very wealthy area. Well, some areas are, but like what was mentioned, we need to make sure that everyone and every need is addressed. So again, I'm hoping to be the voice for my constituents and, looking at programs to find subsidies. I mean, look at the city, how expensive it is for a studio apartment. They're getting help from government. We need to do that for our seniors. We need to do that for our young adults. We need to do that for all of for all the residents here. And again, making it more affordable. So, food, electric, housing, there's so much we can work on, and I want to go on the state level and get that job done.
Okay, thank you. Yes. Rebuttal?
Just very briefly, I understand the comments about the affordability that we all seem to agree upon in election cycles, but as just was discussed by Ms. Anchor, that that she would be in the majority. Well, that majority has given us the increase I mentioned before, and congestion pricing, and the highest tax area of the nation. They have given us, some criminal justice reforms that have not helped. They've given us the self-imposed migrant crisis that we spent literally billions of dollars sent to New York City in the past 2 years to fund the self-created crisis, when those are hardworking taxpayer dollars. So I get it. I was not in the majority and certainly passed things like the Community Housing Fund, made changes to the Community Preservation Fund. So it doesn't, I think that comment is not really that majority No, thank you. As far as adding members to that side, because they're the ones who created this mess, and less government is certainly more, and they don't think that way.
Okay, thank you.
I have a rebuttal on that.
There's only one rebuttal per
Okay.
question. So because we could get in a rut and not move forward, and there were lots of topics.
Okay.
And one of them that a lot of people mentioned was affordable housing, which you have both made comments about. The next question goes back to Sarah. So many of our local businesses and farms rely on seasonal migrant workers and immigrant labor. How does New York State's status as a sanctuary state impact our local economy?
So I am for legal immigration and migration, and I do not support illegal immigration. My opponent accuses me of being, representing the majority. I'm a moderate, if not conservative voice, and I will bring that voice into New York State. We need the workers, but we need a better process. The federal government needs to fix this. They were ready to until, basically Republican Party killed the bill in the in Congress. We're hoping to get, again, a good process so we can get some good workers to make our economy flourish. But right now, everything is under the table. Everything is hidden. And there goes, the money that we're getting for taxes. We need to make sure it's fair across the board, because right now it's not fair. My daughter has a friend from Austria, and she went through the process to work here in the United States. We need to make sure that we're supporting that process and fixing it as much as we can, even on a state level. I do not support the idea that we can keep bringing folks here, because we can't sustain it. They say when a mother and her child are on an airplane, the mother has to get the oxygen first in order to help her child. That's what we need to do as a country. We need to make sure we're taking care of the country, making sure that our Americans are being taken care of before we can extend help. But then again, it's a tough place to be, because there are people struggling that are in danger of dying if they go back to their country. So those folks need to be vetted on a federal level. And also on a federal level, I feel that we need to work with those countries. The drug cartels are pushing folks from South America and Central America into the United States. We need to crack down. I chaired the opioid advisory panel. I worked a lot with the drug addiction issue. And again, there is a lot we need to do within our country, but also outside the borders.
Okay, thank you. You notice that when the stop sign goes up, it's not like a guillotine that comes down. You can each finish the sentence that you're on, but please don't expand it and make it a run-on. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
Anthony, your turn.
Yeah. Well, we get nervous. Do you guys run a tight ship? You know what I mean? So we don't want to get yelled at. As far as that, the migrants, people from other countries, the immigrant workers are a huge part of our economy on Long Island, particularly on the East End. So there needs to be a distinction between the crisis, which is what we're referencing, where we have, by the stroke of a pen, we've been declared a sanctuary state. Governor Cuomo did so, and there isn't even legislative action that's necessary in order to just say that we're no longer sanctuary state. So there is a balance that needs to be struck there, without question. We have a system of rules. True asylum seekers are welcome. We're still the United States, of course, but when we have folks pouring in and we're not getting the funding from the federal government to sustain those folks, then we need to stop. We need to turn off the water that's pouring in to fill the basement, to fill the flood that has created this issue, because it's not subsiding at all. In fact, it's getting worse. I believe that the A1A visas are allowed, so you can have folks who come in for work purposes, and they can come out, they can come here for several months, most of the year, they can go back home, and then they can return. There absolutely is a need for individuals to work in our economy, without question. And that's a completely different question, though. We can't conflate those issues, because this migrant crisis is overwhelming. It was 1.9 billion and then 2.4 billion last year in our budget, in the aid to localities bill that was sent to New York City. In addition to all the jobs that are being cut now, this is a critical mass. There's nothing compassionate about it when these folks are passing through terrible conditions to get here illegally, pour through our border, and then we start using our taxpayer money to remove services from those of us who live here. So it needs to be addressed, and it can be done with the stroke of a pen.
Great, thank you. Okay, the next question, and I'm sure this is definitely a quality of life question that I'm sure you're both familiar with. The trade parade is now a common phrase among locals on the East End, entering or leaving town and moving from one hamlet or town to another nowadays requires added time and lots of patience. Our roads are clogged with stop and go traffic, and County Road 39 has become a dangerous thoroughfare. The East Hampton Star last year made this comment: tradesmen drive from where housing is cheaper to where business is lucrative. That won't change. What will change? Current rail service is on the North and South Forks is terrible. One possible way would be to reduce road traffic by improving rail service. And there have been some programs that have been tried that have not been very effective. We read that the MTA has announced that they've got $263 million as part of a 5-year plan. Imagine 5 years out, we have to don't hold your breath, to upgrade the South Fork connection, but no immediate workable solution is in sight. How do you see this problem being resolved? It's a nightmare transportation problem. What would you do, Sarah?
Now, how come I'm first?
Because you're alphabetically, you are first.
Okay, fine. Because I'm like, boy, I do see it. And I've often wondered, like, what in the world? I'm thinking, well, can they use boats? Can they use ferries? How do you get around the roads when there's just not enough road room for the traffic that's there? So, I would support the idea of railways. I know I'm working over here in Port Jefferson to electrify the railroad over here, and they're looking to rebuild. But out east, they're in desperate need of better transportation. And it's not even just the parade that they have out there, the work parade. It's also the tourists that come during the summer. You have one event, and it could take you 2 hours to get from Southampton to East Hampton. There needs to be a better a traffic flow. And that's something that I think the DOT can work on, the Department of Transportation on a state level. Look at the road repair that's going on right now. I mean, maybe a little bit. I actually had to call today. I took County Road 83, and I had to call the state to fix a road because this is the intersection of North Ocean and Route 25. And there's a 3 or 4 inch gap, and cars are going fast. The problem is if you don't say something, it doesn't get fixed. And that's what I want to do again on a state level. As far as transportation, I've worked a lot as a county legislator with the DOT and the local municipalities to add, red lights and traffic safety, working the Rails to Trails, which is a 10-mile recreational path. There has got to be an answer, as far as dealing with this. And I would say, again, trying to advocate to create additional train service. Buses, I don't think will work except for the tourism part, because the people that are, doing the businesses, they need their trucks. So I think it's best to get the communities together and really come up with some out of the box ideas, because right now what's happening is just not working.
Thank you. Anthony.
Sure. Well, the good news is we're in the MTA 20-year capital plan, which is critical for sidings. And as far as the volume on the South Fork, you can't fit any more trains. So no matter how many times you want to study it, there just is not enough. We can't put in a second track, but we can put in sidings. And for those folks who don't understand what that is, it basically allows the trains to pass each other. They are at full volume. and the Cannonball leaves, in the summertime, leaves 200 people on the platform at Penn Station. So, those are the things that we can do in light of the geography, particularly of the South Fork, that we have trains at full capacity. The South Fork commuter connection that was reinstated after COVID, we got it back going again. That has been, I think, fantastic. The ridership is doing great. Those are the type of ideas that can help, and I think it's a combination of many ideas. There's no real easy answer, but sidings would be huge. That means we can get more trains to and from. That is the biggest way to I think or one of the more significant aspects or ways that we can reduce the traffic, and the trade parade, and then of course housing. Again, we're doing what we can to try and keep it down, keep the cost of homes down, work with accessory dwelling units. The problem is it's just so expensive to build that we don't want affordable housing to be, quote, affordable and $750,000 for a 2-bedroom. You don't want them to be estate homes. So you've got to find that dynamic and strike the balance. And so as far as what we can do, we've been doing, myself, Assemblyman Thiel, when I was in the Assembly on the North Fork with Senator Laval, we lost weekend service on the North Fork. And those of you who live up there with me, it's been discovered. Try and make a left turn even now between the pumpkin pickers and folks going to the winery. So we were able to increase the service there. Public transportation is a very big aspect of that plan.
Okay, thank you. Next question, we're moving on to a topic of misinformation and working together. There were many questions that came in under that topic. There's lots of talk about politicians being able to work across the aisle to get things done. Will you put party affiliations aside for the good and benefit of your constituents when it comes to controversial issues? Sarah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a Democrat. I was elected 7 times in one of the most Republican districts out of the 18 legislative districts in Suffolk County. We have 1.5 million people in Suffolk County. So I've represented my constituents. As a Democrat, even though they were, again, Republican, because I found common ground. And again, there's a lot of controversy out here, and people ask me, well, how did you do it for 13 years? And the answer is you determine the common ground. You find out what's there, what's the foundation that we can create together to move forward. And that includes public safety. That includes protecting our kids, protecting our health, our water, our environment, acquiring open space. There's so much we can agree on than we disagree on. And I think this country has become so divided and divisive that it's not healthy. It's not a healthy environment in general. So, as a member of the state Senate, I'll have a very good moderate voice to bring into the state and, again, address these issues that are on the minds of our constituents and the residents. It's more important, the idea of being a public servant. I'm here to amplify your voice. I'm here to listen to your issue and bring it where it needs to go, whether it's a department, an agency, we're maybe working with a not-for-profit, if it's a mental health or a drug addiction issue. There's so many resources here in government, and our taxpayer dollars pay for it. We should be putting it to the best use possible, and I figure out how to do that in all the many different projects that I've worked on. And it's there for everyone. It doesn't matter what party you're in, it doesn't matter where you are, who you are. These services are there for you, and I want to make sure I bring that to the constituents.
Thank you. Anthony.
Yeah, of course. I mentioned it earlier. I've passed 57 bills, most of which the governor has signed. Some more are still pending. And you need to work across the aisle to get things done for the community. It's not about ego or, there was, I think, a comment before about how the Republicans killed an immigration bill that, certainly the other side could do whatever they would like to do. And I'm not going to get into any federal issues, but it's what's best for the community. For example, that housing fund, there were many folks in my conference who voted against it, but we passed it. And I passed it with Assemblyman Thiel, who is a Democrat. So we work together to do what's best for our communities, because that's what we're paid to do. That's why we go up there. The North and South Fork behavioral health initiatives, two more examples across party lines. When I was in the Assembly, we created the one on the North Fork. Now that I'm in the Senate, I have to make sure that both of those are funded. So we have one on the South Fork and one on the North Fork. The Assemblywoman up there, who was my successor, is a Republican. So we're working with all parties to try and get to the finish line and get those programs fully funded, which they have been. So, those are just a couple of quick examples, but absolutely. And it's interesting because we have on the state level, I think we're very different than there's a lot of fighting and a lot of public display on the federal level. But I hang around with some of the most progressive members from New York City. They come to my events, and their hearts are in the right place. They just have a different view on how to make the world a better place. We disagree on policy, and I joke about them. I joke with them all the time about it to try and meet in the middle and get through some of those concerns that I have, and to address those that they have as well. So that's really acting like adults is certainly an important thing when you're in government.
Great, thank you. The next question. Everyone is entitled to his own opinion, but not to his own facts. That quote by Senator Moynihan is from a column in the Washington Post from 1983. It was true then, and it should be true today. However, misinformation and disinformation are widespread on social media sites such as Instagram, TikTok, X, and Facebook, places where many people, and especially young people, get all of their news. As an elected official, what role do you see for yourself in countering misinformation and bringing truth to your constituents? Sarah.
Absolutely. So you have to hold those folks accountable. And that's the problem. So many organizations have gotten away of lying and providing misinformation. And I truly feel, and I know this is for a fact, that our adversaries are bringing social media into our country just to create more confusion. That's China and Russia, North Korea. We know for a fact. But the problem is, though, we need to crack down on the social media. TikTok is where a lot of, I just read an article yesterday in the paper. TikTok is where a lot of young people are getting their news. They're being informed. And TikTok is owned by China. I know, the United States is looking to either ban it or, crack down. And we need to do more of that. Social media affects our kids dramatically. And, I worked with Children in Screens. It's an organization, a national organization, to hold those technology companies accountable. I had a situation where a teen actually committed suicide because of social media. The mental health impact is so dramatic, and we need to do more on a state level. I worked with the SuffolkStopBullying.org or .org. It's a Suffolk County website, and I work with Suffolk County Health Department to crack down on the social media and the misinformation that the kids are getting. It's children, it's adults, and especially during the political campaigns. So I'm thinking maybe there needs to be a special committee of oversight, like you talk about the MTA, the oversight board. There needs to be something more to create more of an impact to make sure that the misinformation and disinformation, is not reaching the people, or at least those companies are being held accountable. So that would be my answer.
Okay.
Well, I'm more of a freedom guy in some respects. That I don't agree with any prior restraint on speech. I do agree that we need to police quote, misinformation, I think what might be helpful is possibly some legislation that could be addressed on the federal level regarding those individuals who are addressing folks or creating situations that are filled with lies, because that is not something that should be allowed anyway. And particularly for those of us in public office, we have a certain standard, the Times versus Sullivan standard, for defamation, where I'm not going to get too lawyerly, but the actual malice proof that you have said something with actual malice, but in order for you to be found civilly liable for saying something about someone who is a public figure, is basically non-existent. So if you're going to say something and lie about someone, you should have to pay financially. I think that would be appropriate. As far as having a group of individuals that are either appointed by either party, I have absolutely no interest in any of that on either side, by any group of appointees or political people or elected officials, basically censoring and reviewing what they believe is misinformation or otherwise. I think it's a very fine line, it's a very fine balance. If it's dangerous, then obviously that's not protected speech. But I really think that there's a balance that needs to be struck there. And I don't think having committees necessarily is a good idea. But we should be able to have some sort of a sanction or penalty for those individuals who are spreading inaccurate information that could be dangerous or is untruthful. But it's not illegal to lie or to say outrageous things, unless obviously there's some sort of a ramification, or that there is there are some issues or results that or an unfortunate result as due to that language.
A rebuttal?
Yes.
Okay, so I think committees and bringing the community together to talk about important issues is extremely important. You know, you have to look at every perspective when you're addressing an issue. You know, it's like a stone. You look at the stone and the flaws on the other side, and if you don't see it, if you don't hear it, you're not going to understand the full impact. You know, I've been on a lot of committees. I've created them, from the North Shore Erosion Task Force, the Schools Traffic Safety Committee, to the Safe Hotline, working on a panic button for school districts. When you bring people together, especially professional experts, you get a much better understanding of really what the problem is, and then you're able to truly tackle it. And that's what I've been doing, again, not just as a county legislator, but going back 25 years when I was addressing the high cancer and environmental issues. And again, bringing people together around my dining room table right here 25 years ago, and we got so much done. And I think we can do more of that. I know we need to do more of that, especially locally, so we can make sure that these safety issues are being addressed.
Okay, thank you. Yes, rebuttal.
And just really more of a comment than anything. With respect, and this has popped into my head when Sarah mentioned schools, that we do have a bill that I voted for in order to have some reasonable restrictions of cell phone use in schools. I mean, obviously the children and kids are the ones that can be most affected by this misinformation and disinformation. But, there's got to be a balance there, that they should be able to have access, of course, if they have an emergency, but to an extent, reasonable limitations on access to that information by way of those darn devices in their hands. I have 2 kids, both in college, so they're good with their devices, but that's something that I think is reasonable, and I support it.
Okay, thank you. I think you've both touched on, in answering that question, you both touched on parts of another question, which had to do with restrictions and cell phone use and the negative impact of all of this on younger people in schools. So thank you very much for those answers. The next question: the Shinnecock Nation moved forward in August with plans to construct a 10-acre gas station and travel plaza on the north side of Sunrise Highway in Hampton Bays, despite local resident complaints and an ongoing battle with the Department of Transportation over the nation's construction of huge billboards in 2021. Where do you stand on this project, and what would you do to improve relations with the Shinnecock Nation?
So I feel they have the right to build this. It's their nation. I mean, it's their land. But I also understand that if they were to build a gas station, there's issues. The gas could leak. Infrastructure needs to be in place. And from what I read in the paper, recently today, is that they are willing to work with government, with our government, to make this travel gas, the travel stop happen. The Shinnecock Nation is such a incredible cultural legacy, and we need to value that, and we need to appreciate the beautiful culture of our Native Americans. I got to meet Lisa Gorey recently, and I went to the Shinnecock powwow, and it's just, it's like you're walking into a different world, and we need to make sure we're supporting again the Shinnecock Nation. Also understand that within their culture, there's a high incidence of addiction. And we need to be there for them, just, and make sure that they're a thriving nation, a thriving community, by supporting projects like this. But again, the flip side is, let's make sure that outside of this project, that the infrastructure is set, that the environmental impact is understood. And again, I feel honored to be able to work with the Shinnecock Nation. There's so many things that we can learn as a society about Native American culture, and we have it right here in our backyard. We need to cherish it. We need to nurture the culture and the people, because they are incredibly, important, not only to, our understanding our mental health or whatever, education, but our economy. Again, it'll be an honor to work with the Shinnecock Nation.
Thank you. Anthony.
When I first got into the Senate, my office was briefed on a plan for the off-ramp for the gas station. And my understanding is that it was never submitted to the DOT, so I'm disappointed. The traffic on Newtown Road there will be, I think, devastating to the community. So I actually just spoke to some constituents last week about this. I've been speaking with the trustees. I want to try and have more of a discussion as well with the town to see what is going on. My understanding, there have been stop work orders issued, and they might be ignored. So I'm very concerned about that construction there, because we do need a ramp from the highway. I think it's got to go through that residential area with a very significantly sized gas station is not good for the community. And I've heard people are very upset. And so I think from our end, there isn't that much we can do on the state level, but the town certainly can, with respect to violations and restraining orders, and ultimately a lawsuit if necessary. And I've always worked closely with the nation, and I intend to, if I'm reelected, without question. But I think there's got to be, again, I wouldn't suggest that they're acting in less than good faith necessarily, but it seems as though that there's a little bit of a standoff right now going on, and that can't happen. So I'm hoping to act to mitigate it somewhat, and maybe even mediate to get to a reasonable situation, because right now the traffic will devastate that community, because it will be a highly accessed gas station, because of course the prices will be reasonable, and there'll be a lot of other financial advantages to use it. So we want to find that balance, but we have to also consider the community needs when they move forward with that plan.
Okay, thank you.
I have a rebuttal on that one.
Okay.
So I feel that this type of project will benefit not just the community around it, again, done right, working with the community, but also with the people, the tourists that are traveling. Look what the state did. They built a really beautiful tourist stop over off the expressway. Do you know how many times people were saying, oh, I wish, we had restrooms to use from going from the city out east? Well, here's another place for folks to go. There'll be restaurant, restrooms, gasoline, and you'll be able to see too the culture of the Shinnecock Nation. You know, my daughter and I took a trip out west last year. 1,500 miles we drove, and it was incredible. You know, the landscape, but more importantly, the people and the culture. And like I said, we have an incredible opportunity right here in our backyards. We can work together and we can make this happen, and we can make it, you know, work for both local residents and the Shinnecock Nation.
Thank you. All right, next question. According to Newsday, crime is down 12% in Suffolk County, but the public doesn't believe it. Is the opioid crisis in our area partly to blame for this public perception? And how will you make our communities safer and change public perception?
So I chaired the opioid advisory panel, which we changed into the addiction prevention support advisory panel for Suffolk County for the past 5 years. And we are seeing a slight decrease in opioid overdose. But again, the issue is that China's manufacturing fentanyl, carfentanil, xylene, and it's coming from the south border and also even from Canada. We have to crack down on this. I wrote a letter to the editor, you know, using our $860 billion military funds and fighting our internal war on opioids. And yes, I do feel it contributes to crime. I worked with the Sheriff Toulon to look into creating the John J. Foley Center as an addiction center connected to our jails, because the majority of those folks either have addiction or mental health issues. And it's increasing with recidivism if we don't help rehabilitate. Yes, I believe that we need to do more in addressing just local crime. I worked a lot with neighborhood watches. So if you see something, say something. You know, the neighbors are the best security in neighborhoods. And if police don't know there's a problem, they're not going to address it. Just like I talked about the road issue that I reported today. There's a lot more we can do. What the problem is bail reform. We have to fix bail reform. That has really become a local issue, and the fact that the police are only able to give citations. So if someone shoplifts, they're given a citation, and then hopefully they'll show up, you know, in front of a judge. If they don't, then then folks will have to go to jail if they don't follow, you know, the process. And that's something I'd like to work on in Albany, you know, to fix those bumps in this type of process with bail reform, because right now the judges have less discretion to some extent. They were given more in a recent update or revision to this bail reform bill, but crime is a #1 issue. If you don't feel safe where you live, then people are going to move, and we must continue to make sure people are safe.
Thank you. Anthony.
Sure. I believe it's more than a perception, Susan, because those numbers were year to year. And I don't know if you saw there were revised federal numbers as well, really about nationwide, but particularly in New York, our numbers are astronomical compared to where they were in 2018 and prior to that, and prior to the one-party rule. So yes, there are real concerns, and we're on our 5th version of bail reform. It's still not fixed. I don't know if you saw that just this past week, they arrested someone who sold fentanyl-laced pills to a high school student in Garden City. She was walking home, got what she thought were Percocets, took the pills, overdosed on fentanyl. They arrested him. He knew he laced them himself. He knew he was dealing poison, and he was released on bail. It was a bail ineligible. So the judge could not set bail for that individual, even though it was essentially, in my opinion, a manslaughter case. If I put rat poison in your coffee, knowing you're going to drink it, I get charged with a bail-eligible crime like a murder or a manslaughter. That doesn't work with drugs like fentanyl. So the system is broken in that regard. I'm a former prosecutor, as I said. I have dealt with this. I fought against it in 2019 when I was still in the Assembly. I'm the ranking Republican on the Judiciary and Codes Committee. Anything with a penalty goes through codes. I'm the deputy floor leader in our conference. So I'm constantly up on the floor, on my feet, trying to help change these policies, and they've made significant changes as a result. But unfortunately, there's a New York City contingency that refuses to make any real sweeping changes. We also had in 2019 discovery reform. Last year at a public protection hearing, Alvin Bragg's office complained that they had to dismiss 49% of their DWI arrests because of paperwork snafus. That was in the discovery reform bill, which was also in 2019 in a budget bill. So there's a lot that can be done. And I think it's a little more than perception, quite frankly. I think the numbers actually reveal that it is more dangerous than it was from years prior.
Okay, thank you.
And
We're running tight on time, so you may have your rebuttal instead of taking another question, and then we'll go to closing statements. Okay.
Okay. So from what I understand, shootings in New York State, they're down 26% in 2024. But what we need to remember is we need to make sure we have enough law enforcement on the ground, on the street, making sure they get paid really what they need to get paid, making sure they're safe, they get the equipment that they need. I worked with Suffolk County Police, throughout my 13 years as a legislator, making sure that they had what they need. On a state level, we need to make sure our state police, I know my opponent did not fund, he defunded our state police. Like, our troopers are really important. They're again, watching, making sure that, our traffic is safe. And we need to do more with that on a state level. And, look at New York City. Let's focus on that in the city too. Now that cannabis is legal, that's a problem. How do you identify someone driving under the influence? I know they're coming with new technology, but that whole system needs to be overhauled. And again, as the chair of the addiction panel for Suffolk County, I want to take what I've learned on the county level and bring it up to the state and really tighten that and overhaul that entire Office of Cannabis.
Okay. Yes, a rebuttal.
Thank you, Susan. So I am endorsed by every law enforcement agency from New York City to Montauk. So, and it's silly season. You make cute comments like I'm defunding police and doing things like that. In fact, there's a really ugly commercial that my opponent has out about me about voting against child vape. That actually was in the discovery bill I just mentioned, that even Alvin Bragg's office was complaining about. That was in a big budget bill, and I voted against discovery, but there was a little nuanced corner that had something else that they're trying to exploit. So please don't be fooled. I 100% support law enforcement. Law enforcement 100% supports me. I have the most pro-police bills of any legislator. So that's one thing. Secondly, what I wanted to say before I had to respond to that, also, DCJS, the Department of Criminal Justice Services, admitted at that public hearing last year that when someone gets appearance tickets for larcenies, multiple larcenies, they were asked, Dean Murray asked, if I am given an appearance ticket for 13 separate larcenies or 16 separate larcenies, and then I come in for arraignment, how many arrests is that? They said, we count that as one. So those statistics need to be reviewed a lot more closely than they have been. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, there are so many things that we have not been able to touch on, like reproductive rights and health care in this area, and veterans services, and the Community Preservation Fund. They're all things that I know you're both very much aware of. But you now have an opportunity to give us a closing statement. You each have 1 minute. Sarah goes first.
Okay, so given the opportunity to be your next New York State Senator, I will continue to amplify your voice. And that's what I believe elected officials and public servants are elected to do. I've been working towards that, as part of the local organizations. We created one of the first public-private partnerships here in Mount Sinai. It's called the North Shore Heritage Park. That was going to be a Home Depot. We listened to the community and we transformed this beautiful area into one of the best parks. I will be pro-choice, unlike my opponent who voted down the ability to be to decide on, a female reproductive healthcare choice. I will be full-time. Again, if you're asking differences, and I will be totally engaged in my community. If elected, I will be the first woman ever to be elected as your New York State Senator. So again, I'm looking to make sure that, the environment, budget affordability, traffic safety, these are things that I've worked on, and I want to continue to do what I know, bring the resources that I know where they're located and bring them to constituents, because it is our job to do that. But thank you for this opportunity.
Anthony, closing statement.
Sure. Thank you. And thank you for having me. Thank you to the league for doing this and allowing us to make our pitch to the community for their vote. I believe my record speaks for itself, working for the community and staying focused on those issues that are important to us. As far as support for my campaign, I've been fortunate enough to have the endorsement of almost all of the labor unions, building trades, the police, as I indicated, the teachers union, had an endorsement by Newsday, who talked a lot about my policies as well. So if you even pull the Newsday article, we'll help you folks out. But I just ask that, as I just mentioned earlier about some of the things that you see now in your mailbox and on TV. A lot of this stuff is unfortunately is dishonest and disingenuous. So just look it up for yourself. That's all I ask. Take a look, see what I've done. If you have any questions, you can call my office or call the campaign office. I'm more than happy to explain my positions on these things. And hopefully I can have your vote in a few weeks on November 5th. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you both for coming to begin with, and for sharing your thoughts, your feelings, and your positions. It's been thought-provoking and very informative, and I know our audience appreciates the time that you spent with us. You can see, I'm talking to our audience now, you can see a rebroadcast of this program on CTV's YouTube channel in a day or two, and you might want to stick around at 7:30. There will be the congressional debate for the 1st congressional district at 7:30 tonight. Also, every vote counts. We know that every vote counts. Don't forget to vote. I mean, that sounds almost childish and silly, but that's not. Don't forget to vote. You can vote at your usual voting place between on election day, or you can do early voting between October 26th and November 3rd. And when you are casting your ballot, don't forget to turn the ballot over and cast your vote for the propositions on the reverse side. We didn't have a chance to talk about them, but one is the ERA amendment, and the second is the Suffolk County Water Quality Restoration Act referendum. So those are important too, and they need your eyes. Thank you very much, and good night.